might just think of yeast as an ingredient in bread or other baked goods, but actually yeast is all around us, floating everywhere, and we would not be where we are in science today without this amazing organism. First, here are some yeast basics. Yeast cells are eukaryotic, just like human cells, which means they have a nucleus which holds DNA, as well as several other organelles. There are literally thousands of these different types of yeast cells floating all around us at all times, but the most common type of yeast, and the most well-known, is called Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Saccharomyces cerevisiae was first developed for the making of wine and beer, but now it is the yeast at the forefront of research. It's also the primary yeast used in baking, so chances are most of the baked goods you've ever eaten have been made possible by Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So now that you know these basics about yeast, here's why yeast is so important in science. First off, yeast DNA and human DNA are extremely similar. In fact, they share 23% of genes in their genome. They are so similar, in fact, that a human gene, if inserted into a yeast genome, can function perfectly as a yeast gene, and vice versa. Also, yeast allows researchers to perform evolutionary experiments much faster. A human cell takes a full 24 hours to go through the cell cycle and divide into 2 cells, while a yeast cell only takes 90 minutes to divide. Additionally, yeast is extremely cheap, easy, and fast to culture in a lab setting. This means that it is easily accessible to any scientist who wants to work with it. Going along with accessibility, we know so much about the genome of yeast compared to other organisms. The genome of yeast, specifically the genome of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, was the first fully sequenced eukaryotic genome. It was sequenced in 1996 by a team of hundreds of researchers. This means that we know the order of every single piece of DNA inside a yeast cell. Any researcher can access a complete list of DNA in the yeast genome online easily, as seen here. This makes this information available to pretty much anyone who can read a genome. This easily accessible information is used by researchers to understand the function of each individual gene, which they can then apply into human cells. Because of all these factors, yeast is the perfect tool for any research related to the cellular processes or genes of human cells. Yeast is involved in so much research right now, such as understanding the cellular processes related to cancer, testing the use of gene therapies such as gene knockouts against genetic diseases, and studying the proteins involved in neurological diseases such as Huntington's, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. Yeast is truly the superhero of the microorganism world. Without yeast, not only would we not be able to perform all this amazing research, we also wouldn't have donuts or bread. So thank you, yeast!